Welcome to Conversations on Teaching and Spirituality. I am Nancy Lynn Westfield, Director of the Wabash Center. At the producer's desk is Rachel Mills, and of course, Paul Myrie is our creative director. Paul's work on composing of music frames our show. We are very appreciative to Paul for all of his creativity. This is the second of a three-part conversation on issues of teaching and spirituality, which specifically reflect on Howard Thurman's article entitled The Sound of the Genuine. Please note that the entire Thurman article, The Sound of the Genuine, can be found on the Wabash Center's website. The focus for this second session is expressions of the genuine. For these conversations, I have invited two friends, two marvelous colleagues. First, let me introduce Dr. Amy G. Oden. Dr. Oden is professor of early church history and spirituality. She is an independent scholar currently teaching for several seminaries. She has served on faculties of Oklahoma City University, St. Paul School of Theology, as well as Wesley Theological Seminary, where she was also the dean. Her first book, her most recent book, not her first book, but her most recent book is entitled Right Here, Right Now, The Practice of Christian Mindfulness, which we actually, in this conversation of spirituality, commend to our listeners, to our viewers. Amy is a longtime participant and leader of the Wabash Center. Our other conversation partner is Reverend Dr. Shively T.J. Smith. Dr. Smith is assistant professor of New Testament at Boston University School of Theology. Her publications include Strangers to Family, Diaspora and First Peter's Invention of God's Household. She is currently completing a commentary on 2 Peter with SBL Press. Welcome, Dr. Smith and Dr. Oden, to the conversation. Thank you so much for taking this time.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
Mm-hmm. So learning to recognize the sound of the genuine requires imagination, it requires creativity, it requires figuring out that this needs to be figured out, right? A kind of intentionality, as well as a kind of letting go all at the same time. So one of the reasons we're interested in this conversation, the three of us are interested in this conversation, is because we are not trained for these kinds of conversations as teachers.
Right.
And we are trying to develop communities of people who are interested in these conversations. So we suspect there are people out there who are interested and don't know that there are other people out there also interested. So that's why the three of us are convening for this conversation. So Dr. Smith, lead us today in our conversation, frame our conversation, and let's get started.
Yeah, this time we want to focus on the expressions of the genuine that we are bringing in our teaching, that we are making in our teaching, or that we may even be trying to shift the sounds or the expressions of our genuine. And Thurman's Sound of the Genuine piece has a wonderful poem in it that helps us to think about the sounds that we are making as part of our quest in our teaching. So I'm going to read this part of his Sound of the Genuine, which is really about seeking and listening to what he calls the song of the river. So hear these words and meditate on this notion of the expressions of the genuine in our teaching that we're making, that we're interacting with, that we may even be trying to silence sometime or amplify other times. Here's the words of Thurman. There is a children's story written for adults called The Blue Cat of Castleton. You may know it. It is built on a New England legend, which says that no cat mother wanted to have a kitten that had all blue hairs and pink ears. Because if she had such a kitten, it would be that kitten's fate to hear the song of the river. And if the kitten heard the song of the river, following that melody, they would have to leave home, learn the song of the river, and go in quest of a home where the song of the river was recognized. So the kit hero of the story was born all blue hairs and pink ears, except 4 black hairs in his tail. One by one, the black hairs dropped out. This last night, the kitten was asleep. She heard rumbling up in her sleeping consciousness the song of the river. And in a kind of drunken stupor, she got up. shook herself, and wandered down to the river. There, the river taught her the song. Here's the song of the river. Sing your own song, said the river. Sing, sing your own song. Out of yesterday, song comes. It goes into tomorrow. Sing your own song. With your life, fashion, beauty, this too is the song. Riches will pass and power, but beauty remains. Sing, sing your own song. All that is worth doing, do well, the river said. Sing, sing your own song. Certain and round be the measure, every line graceful and true. Time is the mold, the weaver, the carver, time and the work person together. Sing your own song well. Sing well, the river said. Sing your own song. I love that. Time is the mold, the weaver and the carver, time and the work person together. The river says, sing well, sing your own song. I find myself wondering, how do we sing our song well as we teach? And what does it mean to think about teaching as singing a song in the first place? So I come from a family that loves music. And so thinking about the music that I'm making or can make while teaching is so powerful to me. So that's why I wanted to focus on this piece in The Sound of the Genuine. What does it mean to sing well our song as we teach?
I think the Thurman piece, the first word that comes to mind is lovely, right? There's something beautiful about it. There's something lovely about it. And at the same time, like much of beauty, there's something daunting about it. Shively, like you talk about that, what does it mean to be creative and do it well? So like you, I came from a family of musicians too, who music in our house was fun, but it was also nothing to be played with. Right. You couldn't be just a musician. You had to be a good musician.
Right.
Practiced. You had to practice, right? And you might not be practicing your scales, which nobody ever wanted to do, but you couldn't be half stepping.
Right.
So I hear that component in Thurman, and now that as we make the pivot toward teaching, that your teaching can't be a half stepping, kind of showing up half stepping.
Right.
In teaching, that to do it well means that you have given it some thought, that you have opened yourself to it, that your intention is focused on the moments of teaching.
Yeah. I just playing off of that, even sort of thinking about the different kinds of songs that we sing, and so the music that we can make in our teaching. There's music. I remember there's music in our household with my larger family in which we would improv in my grandfather's church in Kentucky. So one song would be "Oh Happy Day," and everyone, it would be all of us, cousins, nieces, uncles, and you had a leader, but we were fundamentally improving our way through it. And then there were other songs. My oldest song is a bassist, right? And so there's other music, classical music, that she'll play that there's no improv. This is played this way, and so she needs to learn the notes and the rhythm this way because she's playing with a larger group of people. There's something about singing our song well here for me that makes a demand on us thinking about the different ways of singing, the different kinds of songs that we can play in our teaching. Some moments are improvisational, and other moments are there may in fact be music that we have to follow in order to get accomplished what needs to be accomplished for the entire whole. I love that opportunity that it gives us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about it's so interesting that we all have a family of musicians.
Wow.
Yeah, I grew up. My grandmother's a piano teacher, and my dad would come home from work every day and sit down with the piano. That was sort of his stress release, and we would all play and sing. And so I'm thinking about the kinds of discipline of some music, of learning as well as improv, and when I think about the classroom, I feel like it took me several years to learn my own song
Yeah.
that I had to try on. I think all the other songs I'd heard, right? All the other instructors I'd had, teachers I had, the ways they taught, the classroom culture they created, to find out, right, what was mine and what wasn't.
That's right.
And to have the space to do that over time. Because just like with music, when you're playing something, when you're in the zone, you're in the flow, it clicks. And it's no longer just a set of notes, but a whole way of being, right? And I find that in the classroom, that when I am in the genuine, when I'm singing my song, there is that quality of more than a set of techniques and tricks, but a whole way of being that invites discovery and learning.
Yeah. What what do you find are I'm not all the way all at all times sure that the songs that I'm bringing with me that may not be my own are necessarily songs I need to uh, lay aside um, at all times. But I do think, Amy, but one of the things you're pointing to is a part of our task as teachers and listening to our song is to begin to articulate um, our playlist of songs, right? That you come into that none of us are coming into the classroom um, uh, untutored, unpracticed, completely unfamiliar with the songs of the classroom that are possible. We have some familiarity with because of our own formations and our own teachers. And so, what does it mean to slow down and to make space for naming the playlist of songs we already have uh, available to us that we automatically bring or assume? Because I think a subtext of this poem, the river's telling the kitten to sing your own song. I think
Mm-hmm.
because there usually you tell someone to do something because it's either not being done or it's not being done, this language of will. So how what role do we need to create in our teaching to name the playlists that we are bringing into the classroom with us, and how do we do that?
Yeah, I think one of the ways is we're attentive to our own experience of teaching,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's so central to the conversations we have at Wabash, critical reflection on teaching. And so I think noticing over time what is happening in my classroom, not just walking out of it because I covered the material I intended to or we did everything I had in my lesson plan, but rather reflecting on and student learning, but also my own experience of that learning. And I realized how much time in the classroom I spent being anxious and
Wow.
nervous and wondering, am I doing this right? All of that. And I think that's natural. That's a part of development in any profession. And that was one of the clues that could tell me when I was singing my own song or when I had appropriated a song that I needed to add to my playlist, right? Or when I remember as an early seminary professor thinking, oh my goodness, I think we're supposed to do devotions at the beginning of class. Like, I remember my seminary professor, would read a prayer or something. I guess I better do that, but didn't have a clue. And it felt so contrived. And I think I spent a couple of years just hoping nobody paid attention to whatever I was doing. So I was
Nothing.
singing all kinds of songs in that sense that weren't mine. And then it kind of got mad and I resented it. And I spent a couple years, well, I'm just not going to do one. This is dumb, and then, so it took me time. So paying attention to our own experience and then giving ourselves some space and patience to find, okay, what is genuine? How can I open the classroom in a way that's real and not just playing church or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also think about playing in the right key, right? I remember, again, as a family reunion, family musician, my dad, who was on the piano, playing the melody line because I could not hear, right? And playing that one note over and over again because you're on the wrong key, you're on the wrong, oh,
Right.
I'm trying to hear it, I'm trying to hear it. And he who had perfect pitch could not empathize because he was never off key, right? So there is that. But the point I'm trying to get to, finding the key, to me, finding your genuine voice in the classroom as a teacher is finding your pitch, is finding your tone, is finding your key, which is about your own experience, as well as the experience of the people in front of you called students, as well as the atmosphere in the classroom, as well as what's going on in the larger context, in the larger world. Because people don't stop being citizens of the larger world when they enter the classroom spaces.
Right.
So trying to atone and attune to what's going on all around you to find the right key is part of our jobs as singing well, right? So not singing by yourself, you're not always the soloist.
That's
right? But trying to blend your voice, find your way into the kind of music, the spectrum of musics, right, in the atmosphere that's happening.
Yeah.
And in fact, that for me, I have learned is one of the marks of the genuine in my teaching. Namely, when I'm able to connect with the energy in the room, read the room, where the students are, and then improvise as needed. That's when I know I'm in the sound of my genuine. If I just want to stick to what I planned and bowl my way through regardless, then I always end up feeling disconnected, out of sorts, like we covered the material, but I'm not sure we learned anything.
Yeah. The other thing that's striking to me, in addition to pitch, and I do want to circle back to the notion of finding our pitch, practically speaking, what are some ways, just letting you know, what are some practical ways in which we might be able to talk about how we can test and find our pitch? But that's not where I want to go right at this moment. I want to play with this notion of the improv and finding sort of the music that the students are making, to also think about song and the music of our teaching being linked to something that is, this will make some people nervous, emotive. One of the things about music that makes it universal across the genres is the way in which it does not just connect, here's Thurman, with the head, and with just the head. It connects with the heart. It doesn't just connect with the heart, it also connects with the hand and the body. There's rhythm, there's movement, or there's stillness. It creates space for you to stop the movement and to be, I mean, that music has a way to move us in ways that are physical and that are emotional, in ways that are productive, right? So that, people, we're wrestling, our students, or we are wrestling with something that's very human and real, and simply speaking it is one thing, but then the right song brings forth, I would say, those cleansing tears, right? Or that stealing moment that you've been trying to reach for in a real way. Does this help us, invite us to start thinking about the ways in which our teaching creates room for a range of the human experiences and reflections that I think are necessary for the intellectual enterprise? Or are we going somewhere that we don't need to be thinking about in our teaching? So
Go ahead, Amy. We're both chomping at the bit.
No, you're good, Lynn. Jump in.
Well, so I don't think we can hand over to Madison Avenue emotions, right? So we know that movies and music and all forms of entertainment try to get around the emotive.
Right.
We would be, surrendering our power to say, no, we don't want emotions in our classrooms. There shouldn't be emotions in our classrooms, as if intellect was just a neck up experience. Right. That when people are moved by the truths, small t, not capital T, that they hear in our classrooms, and it does move them, it does bring tears or anger or sorrow or that range of emotions, we should not be surprised by that range, but know that our genuineness is meeting their genuineness, right? That we are still adults in the classroom, right? You know, I've had students to say, Doc, we don't want to talk about that because it'll make us angry. And I'm like, well, injustice and evil should make you angry, but that you are grown-ups. You don't have to go to fisticuffs in the classroom, right? We're not talking about, you know what I mean? So
Right.
we're not giving up our grown-upness, but we should reserve the right to be emotional people and be moved by the musics of the learning that we are experiencing, and not say, well, I'll feel that after class is over. Right? That's not the kind of experience I want for my students. I want to feel it with them, because we know that there's something different about being at a concert or being in a church service when a group of people are moved by the same thing at the same time, rather than just one person at a time. There's something marvelous about that communal understanding of that was an aha moment that we all shared together, or an oopsie moment that we all shared together, is a very powerful learning experience.
And Lynn, just real quick, is that a song that you carried with you from somewhere else? You learned from somewhere else, or is that perspective of teaching this in this way, this notion of letting in the emotive, the feelings, that human side that's not just intellectual, something that you've had to learn or lean into or cultivate? How did you get that part of your song?
So I'm going to echo Amy. I think I brought it with me, but I think I was so nervous about and anxious about how I was presenting myself and the materials and being in the classroom that it felt like it took me years to calm down. It took me years to learn to be a non-anxious presence. It took me years not to be afraid. And not that I lacked confidence, like one didn't eclipse the other. I had confidence. I was still scared.
Because that's the thing.
You can hold that moment. You can hold that creative tension. You know, scared of everything, and you're still in there teaching and doing your thing. It took, after a while, I did release some of the anxiety, some of the fear, and became a better teacher who then could enjoy the moments that I knew I could orchestrate, enjoy the moments I knew I could cultivate, enjoy the moments of my own improvisation, as well as the moments when I stepped aside and let a student or some students be improvisational in the classroom, right? And do these marvelous things. So it takes technique, but it also takes a kind of confidence and letting go of your own fear. So I've never had a moment, or at least not many, where things blew up and crashed and burned. For the most part, it was marvelous. It was not fraught with all kinds of, deadly things.
Yeah. And maybe that's learning to trust our songs, trusting the genuine as we discover it and live in it more deeply. I do want to address Shively's question, because I really am excited to see that I think we are redefining academic rigor. And it must include all the ways of human knowing. And what neuroscience is telling us more and more is that this whole binary of intellectual and emotional just doesn't hold up to any rational investigation. That actually emotion is such a key source of human knowing. It's a data point, and we ignore it at our peril. And so I think classrooms that want to stay in some false construction of intellectuality are not rigorous. I think that's lazy. I think I'm just going to get harsh here and say that I think it's just unwilling to take the human person in its complexity and in the complexity of our common life. So, with that being said, I think that's why the sound of the genuine is so powerful, is because it is the integrative point, right, of all of those ways of knowing and being.
Yeah.
And I want to get to the why. Shively, you introduced, the how, right? How do you do this? One of the ways that you do this, and I'm following up on Amy, is you learn your students' names.
Wow.
Right? You learn their names, you call them by their name, You don't, if they're an international student or a name that is unfamiliar and does not quite fit in your mouth, you practice their names.
Yeah.
They become real to you in your own classroom and in their own learning experience, because, which is squarely on Thurman and this article,
That's right.
knowing their identities and knowing their names. Now, by knowing their names, I'm not saying a whole bunch of filibustering in class where people tell personal stories until you just can't take it anymore, right? I'm not confusing those things. I am saying that as the person who is leading this excursion, I need you to know my name, be able to call me by my name. I need to know what name I will be known by as the teacher.
Yeah.
Right. So and I need people to know, as an African-American woman, using my title is incredibly important to me and my culture and my people. It is less important to white men, but we have different cultures and different cultural codes. So if you call Bob and Tim and Alan by their first names, you're not going to call me by my first name.
Right.
Those are the cultural codes in our classrooms. I, in turn, will call you by your name. I will look you in the eye when we speak to each other. Those are important things about getting to the genuine, both being seen and seeing each other as teacher and learner.
Yeah. And so I'm going to lean and say, I feel both chastised in a way, and then thinking about, well, no, I work around that because I am not so let me say, I also think it depends on the kinds of courses you teach. So absolutely, in my smaller seminar classes, learning names is absolutely imperative because of the nature of the conversation, the nature of the intellectual exercises we're going through. In my larger lecture classes, upwards of 40, 50, 60 and upwards students, that's virtually an impossible task for me. But there is a way in which I've figured out ways to work around it, especially and this still happens in the classroom in person, but even online this season. One of the ways that I've been able to start doing that is sometimes you have a lot of different windows and you invite people to speak into the space. And so I've created this culture where when you speak into the space, you cannot assume we all see the screen, see your screen and know who's speaking. So you have to say your name. So you'll say, Dr. Smith, this is Dr. Smith, this is Amy. Dr. Smith, this is Lynn. And then you start speaking it. Then I take that as my responsibility to say, hi, Lynn, hi, Amy, to sort of say to reaffirm that I hear you, I see you, knowing good and well that I may not be able to remember your name tomorrow, but I know that in that moment it's important. It's important for me to say to you, I see you, I appreciate the courage that it takes to enter into this space and to put yourself in conversation. The other piece that I think is important in the learning the names is also learning the pronouns. So one of the pieces that I have been learning, that I've wrestled with Thurman and have spoken to in some of my writings around Thurman, is the need to be expansive in the pronouns so that we make room, right, for all the different personhoods that are there. I think that is a very Thurman impulse. In fact, Thurman actually began to have these conversations about pronouns and so forth later in his life. But by that time, he was, up in age, and he was just trying to get it out. But he was aware of, how do we use language and naming to create and open up space for more people to be present. And I think that's a part of the song, that is a part of our songs that we need to think about how we cultivate in the classroom.
Well, and to your point, Shively, for those of us who are charged with curriculum and curriculum assessment and curriculum design and redesign, for people who are planning to continue to have 60, 70, 150 people in a classroom, and then say that it's possible to have good education, those things don't connect with me. Right? So there might be all kinds of financial reasons, architectural reasons to have that many people and call it a course. Please don't then say, and now we want you to do good teaching, learner-centered teaching, teaching with engaged pedagogical models or liberative models. Those things don't go together. So if we're redesigning curriculum, then we have to look at redesigning. It's impossible to know 50 people's names in one course. So why do it that way?
And so one of the things that I love has been the construction of the smaller learning groups, these colloquy groups. So those big groups break down into groups of 10, usually 10 or more than 12. And in my space, I am fortunate. I usually have teaching fellows, right? And so one of the requirements, and so again, this is maybe a little bit of me trying to give them my song and give my teaching fellows an opportunity to think about the song. You have to learn your students' names. Like the way this works in these smaller groups is you have to know who their names and what their gifts and graces are that they're bringing into the classroom from week to week. So I'm absolutely with you. I think that there's a way in which, how do we break these down into spaces where the chorus of songs can be heard, and the particularities and then the harmonies articulated as well, in ways that are very generative in the teaching space in a real way.
Thurman talks about the genuine bubbling up from inside of you.
Yeah.
He also talks about letting the genuine flow through you.
Yes.
Help me understand both the difference between those two. Like if I'm working to get what's in me out, I'm working at that. But now if I'm reading Thurman closely, I'm also working at letting something flow through me, which is a little different.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the sound of the genuine, I'm going to take the flowing through you. When I think about the sound of the genuine flowing through me, that means I am not the source of it. It's sourcing from somewhere else, and I become a sort of channel for it. The question becomes for me, am I aware of the ways in which I am a channel for the flow of other songs? One in particular that's very important to me, and particularly as a first gen, is to always, there's a part of me that always enters classrooms thinking, the sound of my grandmothers and my grandfathers are flowing through me. And my aunts, that's great aunts who shaped me and formed me and fed me and said, you can read that. And I love being a channel for that. I love that affirms me in my standing in the space, but then that also allows me to say that it is okay, good, and right, the sounds that come out of me with my teaching, because you cannot tell me that there wasn't something life-giving, deep, and intellectual and powerful in the way that my grandmother was teaching us to sing, right, in a real way. So I think about that in terms of my connectivity to my own ancestors and family, blood and extended family that have served as the village by which I'm standing in spaces that I'm standing in now. And to embrace that and to be unapologetic about it is important.
Yeah, I really am so glad that Thurman offers both of those postures.
That's right.
Right? The posture, the flowing, and also the, hearing the sound and living out of the sound. I think that they're both true, and they are both different kinds of postures. And I think what the flow invites is what you just described, Shively. It's to recognize that I don't always just summon sort of ex nihilo, out of nothing, create something genuine. All I got is what I've been given, and so whether that's within a theological framework of thinking about the spiritual gifts or the gifts God has given me, or it's thinking about my ancestors and the people that came before that have shaped me, the various communities that I've been a part of that have made me who I am, that have helped me see the genuine, right? So in that sense, I think it's really helpful to recognize that I don't just create this out of nothing. I'm being given, right? And so it's coming through. And there's also a piece of it that is genuinely mine. And in that's the singing my song, which is shaped by all those other things. And so I'm glad he offers both of those.
Yeah. We've kind of touched on the practical, and I want to circle back to that when we started talking about finding your pitch. It and sort of some of the practical ways in which we can start trying to find our pitch in the classroom. So, Lynn, I heard you talk about, the names, learning the names. Are there other ways and other practical matters that come to your mind if we approach teaching as an opportunity to find our pitch, to find I would say not just our single song, but our songs. I mean, many of us find ourselves wanting to engage in a diversity of publics with our intellectual and scholarly and teaching work. And so I'm not always sure that one song fits all, right? So how do we have many songs? So do you have some practical ways to help us start thinking about that?
For me, one of the most critical is what is written into the story, and it's the notion of quest, right? So the most practical is you have to leave what you know. You have to leave what is comfortable. You have to leave what has birthed you and go out to the larger world, and be pushed and pulled and have the genuine flow through you and be invoked, provoked, evoked,
Wow.
out of you, which is scary. I wish the story was you get to stay home and figure out who you are.
But you gotta get out there and do it while
No.
you're
But that's right. That's not the story. The story is you are compelled to go on a quest, to leave the comfortable, to leave the familiar and the familial,
that's
and
right.
go out into an unknown world and possibly foreign world, savage world,
That's right.
exotic world,
That's
all
right.
the things that signal you may or may not fit in those other worlds with other people and others,
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
right? And make your way. You can't get more practical than that, or as scary as that.
That's right. Yeah.
As a historian, one of the ways I help get my pitch and invite students to hear their own, to kind of get the pitch, is to always move in the classroom to the question, so what?
Mm.
Okay, so the Council of Nicaea met, or so this Christological formula came out, or so, Aquinas says it, so what? So that students have to begin to decide what they're going to own, what kind of commitments they bring to the table that allow them to critically engage the content we're learning, so that it's not just about learning a bunch of information,
That's
but
right.
it's always asking so why do we care about this, or should we? Maybe we should, maybe you don't.
Mhm.
And to require students to be in that kind of engagement of the genuine.
That's right. You know, Amy, and I hear in yours another practical piece, which we haven't talked about much, but it is there, is the notion of teaching and mentoring and advising. I mean, so this piece begins with the mother kitten
Yes.
being anxious about having this kitten because uh, she knew what that would mean. She knew that this kitten would have to leave, would be called to something greater, would have to face to go on this quest and to leave the piece. So, what does it mean to begin to imagine our teaching, not just as the kitten in which the river is telling you to sing, but also the intellectual parent and mother? I mean, when I think about my own intellectual story, for instance, I am very aware that that I am where I am because I had professors in undergraduate who had to even educate me what graduate school was, right, and then show me the pathway for this, recognizing what it meant for me to be, a Southern African American woman, first generation, going on the path of biblical studies and theological. I mean, they were just that clear that that was my path, even though I didn't know it, and understood what that would mean, right? What the many spaces I would be in, a lot of times alone, and what needed to be prepared for that. I think that's something else we need to be thinking about as well when we think about the sounds, the sound of the genuine and the sound of our teaching, the ways in which sometimes we are looking at our students, seeing we're a little further along than you. We can see where you're going, where you're headed, what is possible, and to carry that song and that aspirational, anticipatory, and preparatory mode. What do we do to prepare you for when that my grandmother would say, when that river catches hold of you, and you must go on the quest. There's something I need to do now to prepare you for that.
Yeah, I think that's lovely, right? I mean, that's very much in line with Thurman, very much in line. So Shively, is there a practice that you would lead us in?
Yeah, I want to create space for us to listen to our sounds, think about our sounds and the different sounds that we can make, and as such, the different sorts of expressions and actions that we can take on as teachers in the classroom, compelled to act on the sounds of the genuine ourselves by a Thurman meditation for Meditations of the Heart. Thurman has a meditation in Meditations of the Heart called Canal, Reservoir, or Swamp. And I love it because he talks about these three different bodies of water and the different sounds that they make. He uses them as a metaphor to talk about the different sounds that we can make in relationality to each other. So I'm going to read this and create space for us just to pause and think about these different sounds as opportunities in our teaching, opportunities in expressing the genuine in our teaching. Hear these words. Are you a reservoir or a canal or a swamp? The distinction is literal. The dominant trend of a person's life may take on the characteristics of a canal, a reservoir, or swamp. The important accent is on the dominant trend. Canal. The function of a canal is to channel water. It is a device by which water may move from one place to another in an orderly and direct manner. It holds water in a temporary sense only. It holds it in transit from one point to another. There are some lives that seem ever to be channels, canals through which things flow. They are connecting links between other people, movements, and purposes. They make the network by which all kinds of communication are possible. They seem to be adept at relating needs to sources of help, friendlessness to friendliness. Of course, the peddler of gossip is also a canal. If you are a canal, what kinds of things do you connect? Reservoir. The function of the reservoir is to contain. It is to hold water. It is a large receptacle designed for the purpose, whether it is merely an excavation in the earth or some vessel especially designed. It is a place in which water is stored in order that it may be available when needed. And its provisions are made for outflow and inflow. Are you a reservoir? Are you a resource which may be drawn upon in times of others' needs and your own as well? Have you developed a method for keeping your inlet and your outlet in good working order so that the cup which you give is never empty? As a reservoir, you are a trustee of all the gifts of the supreme and ultimate. The supreme and ultimate spirit has shared with you. You know they are not your own. So are you a reservoir? Swamp. A swamp differs from either. A swamp has an outlet, but no inlet, has an inlet, but no outlet. Water flows into it, but there is no provision made for water to flow out. The result, the water rots and many living things die. Often, there is a strange and death-like odor that pervades that atmosphere. The water is alive, but apt to be rotten. There is life in a swamp, but it is stale. Are you a swamp? Are you always reaching for more and more, hoarding whatever comes your way as your special belongings? If so, do you wonder why you are friendless? Why the things you touch seem ever to decay? A swamp is a place where living things often and can sicken and die. The water in a swamp has no outlet. Are you a swamp? I must ask you one more time, dear sisters and brothers and siblings, are you a canal, a reservoir, or a swamp in your teaching? If your genuine sound was water, which water sound would you make as you express and live out your vocation as teacher? Amen and Ashe. So I should say that's an adaptation. So it's all Thurman's words. I sort of rearranged it a bit so they could be in their individual sections, but that's the space. I really would love your reflections on that.
I mean, the whole notion of water and the power of water, right? So how water is contained or how it spends its life is a powerful way to think about teaching. Mm. So I applaud Thurman for taking an everyday experience of water and molding it into a way that we can both relate to as well as pushes us to some of his deeper and more expansive themes about our own teaching. So thank you, Shively, as well as thank you to Howard Thurman.
Yeah, it's such a vivid image. The three are kind of vivid, and I'm still sort of sitting with the sound of it, not just the appearance, but the sound, and the sound of water, the way water sounds as it moves is so different. And I don't really know what I think the sound of a swamp is. I'll have to really, in terms of the water, you know, I can think of the animals, but, and so it does help me see some things, I think, differently in the different kind of modes of teaching that I do. Yeah, when I think sometimes I'm a channel, sometimes I'm a reservoir, and how that shows up differently. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the good thing I've enjoyed about our conversation is the ways in which sounds of the water have played different roles, even in how we were talking. So to move from Thurman's sound of the genuine, it is the sound of the river beckoning the kitten to make the sound, so that the water sounds of our teaching can be beckoning sounds. We beckon our students, we beckon ourselves to sing our song and then to sing our song well. And so then in that way, our songs are inspired by the opportunities that a water can make for us. And then ending here was a way to think about all the different sounds of water that we have available to us, that in my mind, no one is exclusive, is singularly exclusive. So it may be that the opportunity is for us to think about the sounds of our genuine water sounds as many different kinds of bodies of waters moving and stilling in different ways as opportunities for things that can happen in our classrooms as we live out and create space for our students to live out the sound of the genuine in them.
Yes. Dr. Shively Smith, Dr. Amy Oden, what a terrific conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And we are out.